So I'm Drew. I'm the peer support specialist here at Hope. I came into this position originally just over 3 years ago now to introduce peer support to Hope, which we've done now. So I wrote a framework, wrote the program essentially, and did what I could to train the existing workforce to understand what peer work is. And how it can best be rolled out through our services. And that's the phase we're still in now, I guess, is rolling out the services. So my role has transitioned from writing the program or developing the program to supporting the peer workers that we have. In a lived experience role or a designated lived experience role, it's not just about having lived experience. Everyone has lived experience. And most of the people we work with in these services, as in our colleagues, will have some experience of with mental health, addiction. That's par for the course. But people working in designated lived experience roles like peer support role not only have the experience, but they've undergone a transformational journey where they learn to reflect on their recovery so that they can use it to support other people. We're trained. We're trained in various modes of peer support, like intentional peer support or personal medicine. But the point, I guess, is that it's not just having the lived experience, it's actually being trained and practiced in using it and being trained in the process of the ongoing reflective practice process, the peer supervision process, so that we can measure it and we know that we're using that lived experience effectively and safely. We talk about capital LE and the small le. So the small le being lived experience that everyone has. But when we capitalise the lived experience, we're talking about it in the professionalised sense. And that distinction it's important to make, because when you come into the workforce in a designated peer role, for all intents and purposes, you're exposed. So there's an extra weight that you carry. There's an extra amount of judgment and negative stigma that goes with it. Yeah, so we've got peer workers now, peer support workers working in our community alcohol and drug services mainly. So when you access those services, I can tell you from my experience, it's quite a harrowing ordeal. So to have someone who has gone through at least a similar experience, who has gone through a recovery journey of their own, who understands that journey, and also someone having undergone that journey who has that higher level of empathy for what it's like to be in that position. That's such a plus for our clients to be able to connect straight away when they come in. And there's a real level of comfort that comes with being able to connect with someone like that. I think it's important to have the peer workers there for a couple of reasons. Firstly, so that they can connect with our service users, with our clients, and really embed that connection. They often act like a bridge for trust. So our clients can connect with our peer workers. And then I guess in a sense they hand that trust over to a case manager or to a counsellor when they say, hey, here's John, he's a counsellor here. He's a really good bloke. There's a level of trust handover there, which is really beneficial. They also they bring the voice of lived experience into the service. Having someone there who's undergone that journey, who can sit in the, whether it's case management meetings or strategic planning meetings, and actually say, hey, from the lens of someone who's been through a service like this, I actually found that that wasn't the most beneficial way to go. Have we considered trying A or B? They also work to bring the voice of the community in, because the idea is that your peer workers have come from your community, so they're almost like a 1 foot in the community, 1 foot in the service. So, they're out talking to the community and bringing that voice and that information back in, which is, that is so essential. If you had a fish and chip shop and you wanted to know if your fish and chips are any good, you've got to ask the people who are eating the chips. One of the real proven benefits of peer work is that it increases access for people who previously wouldn't access services. So for me, when I see people, or when I'm working with people who are typically considered in the hard to reach bracket, and I get a phone call from someone out of the blue just to say, hey, how you going, bro? I just want to run something past you. That's when I go, okay, that connection's there. That's not a typical worker relationship there. This person obviously feels some level of trust in this relationship to call me. And, for me, I guess that's a great feeling, because it's always nice to know you're doing a good job. But at the end of the day, I'm in peer work because I want to see the guys get up. I've seen enough of my mates go down. So to see people who previously wouldn't access the service stepping in, and maybe partially because they feel safe in the relationship that I've built with them, that is a really good feeling. Within the service, I think having peer workers challenges the stigma or the idea that people never recover. Unfortunately, that still exists. Having someone working in the service who is living proof that people recover, and that people can go on to do greater things. There's no limit on recovery. It's so beneficial for the service, and for our counsellors and caseworkers and managers to be able to see and experience that, but also for the wider system, because that stigma is embedded in the wider system, in the way that we deliver services, and even in the way that we get funding for services. The funding that we typically get is for treatment, because we believe the system says that people need treatment. But what we're finding more and more in peer work, because peer work's not treatment, it's more about human growth. And we're finding through peer work that if you support people to explore themselves as humans and grow their strengths, rather than treating the symptoms and hoping that the ailment goes away, we grow the person so that they're strong enough to tolerate the ailment, if that makes any sense. So a friend of mine once showed me this picture. She was working as a peer worker in eating disorders, and she said she drew a circle with a line down one side, and she said, when the young people come in to see me as a peer worker, 80% of their life is consumed with this eating disorder, whether it's the treatment or living through the experience. And the last 20% of the circle represented the person. She said, I don't work with eating disorders, I work with humans. we grow the 20%. That's the area we work in until there's no room left for the eating disorder. So when we're talking about funding from the funding bodies, it's typically thrown at the treatment end. But through peer work, I think we're finding greater access to funding in the prevention space for a start, but also in the human growth space. Yeah, well, for the last over a decade now, they've paid me, which has been wonderful because being broke's not great. I think in all reality, though, peer work has been a really important part of my recovery journey. I came out of rehab and went straight into doing, initially it was some voluntary peer support, and then I was paid to run groups, and still being in that world of recovery, because I was still essentially early in recovery. I'd only been living well for a year and a half at that point. And still being around people who have that recovery glow, people who are working towards that common goal, was really important for me. And I think I kind of found my purpose there.